Welcome to Coming About with David Paragamian, the podcast that dives deep into the minds of leaders who have transformed their businesses and industries, paving the way for a better future. Here's Dave.
Welcome back to my talk with Chris Kuenne, the best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, Ivy League professor, and growth expert who founded both Rosetta and Rosemark. We've been talking about why he spent his entire career studying and applying the principles of customer motivation and personalization to drive enterprise growth, understanding why consumers shop and buy what they do to drive lifetime value. Chris, I want to move on to the subject of leadership. And I fundamentally believe that leadership is very different than management. Management is about tracking and measuring all sorts of things. But to me, leadership has always been about truly making things different, making things better. It's about bending the shape of the Colorado River. The great metaphor I always like to use with employees and colleagues that I work with is that I ask who remembers Millard Fillmore, and never a hand goes up. And of course, he was a president of the United States. And I ask, but who remembers Abraham Lincoln? Every hand goes up. And of course, they held the same job. Their resumes essentially are the same, but of course they're not. Lincoln did things that only Lincoln could do, and he didn't do them with a focus group, and he didn't do them with an advisory panel. He decided to make big changes. He believed in his heart what was right, and he had conviction about it, and he made it happen. And I always encourage people, bring yourself to work every day to do what you believe is right. Be a Lincoln, not a Fillmore. Now, Chris, I know you've studied leadership traits. You've taught this at Princeton. You founded a company that was based on insights of personality-based segmentation. So I know you're deep into psyche and motivation. Let's talk a little bit about those psyches of founders and entrepreneurs that build businesses. You've been able to classify and suggest that there's just a handful of archetypes of successful founders and builders. What can you share with us about that?
Yeah, well, you really identified sort of two of the four key elements that discriminate or differentiate entrepreneurial leadership styles. So I'm happy to talk quickly about what those factors are, and then how those factors come together to create what we call the four builder types. So we used the Rosetta technique, personality-based segmentation. We interviewed several thousand very successful entrepreneurs, and we discovered a pattern that first, what separated them from one another was the following four things. First, and you touched on two of them. First, how they manage. Are they hands-on, or are they more laissez-faire? How do they lead? And the lead dimension is really, do they see the team as an extension of themselves, or do they see the team as a force that can be shaped and inspired? The third key dimension is, what is their motivation to create a company? And then finally, how do they think about the sort of product and the problem and the impact of what they want to build? So to quickly run through them, and by the way, when we went into this, this was in the era of Steve Jobs was still alive, and people were saying, gosh, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you got to be like Steve Jobs, or today one might say like Elon Musk. And that was kind of the poster person for entrepreneurship. And so one of the questions we had is, do you have to be like that? And the answer is no, you don't have to be like that. But the sub answer is, there is a important builder personality that we call the driver. And the driver is motivated because she or he really has conviction around an idea that actually transcends the market, similar to the famous stories about, the iPod. Nobody knew they needed an iPod, or nobody knew they needed a smartphone that ultimately became the iPhone. And so it's this sort of spontaneous discovery of this is this is the thing the market is looking for. So the driver is really about the product, or as we say in entrepreneur land, the product market fit. The second type of builder is somebody we call the explorer. And the explorer is fascinated by the problem itself, not the product, but the problem. And we like to describe the explorer as a systems thinker, someone who believes there's an underlying system at play. And so you can really lay bare any issue if you understand the underlying elements of that system. The next one is someone we call the crusader, who's really motivated to change the world. So very mission based. So product is driver, problem is explorer, mission is crusader. And then finally, the captain. And after admiring much of your success, Dave, I know you are a captain. And the captain is all about the team. It's all about recruiting, inspiring, deploying the team. And there are many great examples of each of these builder types. But I like to think of you as my poster child for the captain leadership style.
Well, now my mother is thrilled to be listening to the podcast as well. So thank you for that. I also wonder, in the work that you've done in writing the book, and I know that you also, and we'll get to it, I know that you also are an adjunct faculty member at Princeton University where you teach entrepreneurship. I wonder to what extent you believe that even though you can describe and characterize these four sound like discrete entrepreneurial headsets, just how discrete are they? I mean, I totally agree with you. If I had to characterize myself, I would put myself in that captain bucket. But I sort of feel like, well, I've got 8% of that, and I've got 7% of that, and 93% of captain. Do you think there is a little bit of some of these other ingredients splashed in with folks?
For sure. And the way we think it works, and there's certainly lots more research that could be done on this, is we think that you're wired, your central tendency is toward one of these types. However, as adaptive animals that we are, and for those who pick a path through their career that is successful, often successful leaders begin to take on some of the central tendencies of one or all of the other types. And so one of the pieces of work that we did was to figure out when building a team, which type is your best complement. And what the way we thought about this was that sort of like the poles of a north, south, east, west, there's a natural pairing of these types where it's your opposing type that can make your best partner in building a business. And there's no hard and fast rules. And certainly if there are two people building a business, they could certainly be the same type. But one of the, just to play this out a couple steps further, what we found is that the driver and the captain pair very well because the driver is focused on the market and the product market fit, and the captain is focused on the team. The explorer and the crusader team very well because the explorer is focused on the problem and the crusader is focused on the vision and the mission. Sometimes explorers are so focused on the problem that they sort of forget the spiritual motivations that may really enfranchise the team. And so they can pair very well. So I guess just to summarize, no, you're not sort of branded as captain or driver and you're that forever. In fact, you do pick up the tendencies of others. And then it seems like there is a pattern of pairing that can perhaps explain some of the ambiguity of entrepreneurial success.
That makes a lot of sense. And as you were describing those north, south, east, west polarity points, it resonated for me. It's the same reason why in building companies, I've always thought about getting the right diverse senior leadership around the table, because the right pairings of individuals, knowing that they will speak their minds openly about different things, will help us to get to the ultimate right place, but that not everyone is saying the same thing the same way. I always struggled with companies that said, oh, well, we're very like-minded. We're a family here. We all think the same way. Well, okay, well then if you're all thinking the same way, how do you get any diversity of thought? How do you ever pivot into something new? It just feels like you're making the same vanilla ice cream over and over and over if you don't have that, as you say, that yin and that yang of people pulling towards that North Star. Well, I want to make sure that as we use our time effectively, Chris, I want to make sure we also pivot to what is your current chapter, which is after getting the foundation, after founding the business, after selling the business, you haven't stopped. You've been continuing to teach entrepreneurship, and you created a new platform company called Rosemark. Can you tell us a little bit about the mission and vision? What is Rosemark about?
Yeah, most of my friends sort of laugh at me saying, why aren't you on a desert island, or why aren't you finally learning how to play golf? But I think that I was bitten now 25 years ago by this question of if you can understand the why better, you will build a better company, you will build better teams, you will build better loyalty programs. And so I'm a little bit of a dog with a bone on this. And what's happened since Rosetta is the analytic techniques, think AI and machine learning, the data, think, as some people call it, the digital exhaust of all your click streams online. When we combine these two things, we can really take business building to the next level. And so Rosemark is focused on building what we aspire to be the next leader in personalized marketing. Now, personalization, personal this and that, is a term that's way overused. The reality is that most personalization is done on a very superficial basis of demographics, or what you bought last, or the fact you look like somebody else, and therefore the next action is likely to be X, Y, or Z. And we believe we can get underneath that to explain how your motivations and preferences drive your economics. And similar to the work we did 25 years ago in developing personality-based segmentation, we now believe with the tools and data available that this can be used in the marketing automation stack. That's a fancy way of saying can be used in all of the technology that serves up the right product, the right message, the right offer at the right time. And so I think this is sort of one last shot before I let the bone go. I'm very excited to be working on this new idea with some incredibly talented people, both at Princeton University and other people from the marketing and advertising world, to build what we hope is the next platform that really changes the game.
Well, it sounds like there's some brand managers out there who are going to be awful grateful that you are as you said yourself, a dog with a bone on this, because much as we said a little while ago, that concept of in medical imaging, it's no longer enough to take an X-ray. We can get to the deeper level with the CAT scan and the MRI, the tools and the technology that, as you said, to grab all of that digital exhaust and to get really a deeper understanding of this personality-based segmentation. I think certainly most of the brand managers that I know and that I continue to work with and to serve as clients, they do express to me this frustration that the segmentation work that they often do feels like it hasn't changed in 20 plus years. Here's our early adopters, here's our loyalists, these very broad-based 3 or 4 buckets, and then off we go with our marketing campaign. But what I'm hearing you describe is a next level, an advancement from where Rosetta was to where Rosemark is in terms of really leveraging that data so that on the front end, the homework part of the marketing project, it sounds like you're getting even deeper, even better insights, building better segments so that the marketing surfaces and the creative that come out are much more targeted and I would imagine much more measurable. Am I getting it right?
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the ironies of the way predictive modeling works is that it's based on this idea that Dave and Chris look alike, therefore they're most likely to buy this product. Dave's bought it. Chris looks like Dave, so Chris is going to buy that product. And what it really is at its core is statistical guessing that Dave and Chris are similar. So you have that on one hand, this sort of predictive model building and optimization. And it's really focused on optimizing the transaction, getting Chris to buy what Dave bought. And when you think about optimizing a transaction, that's a pretty far reach away from building a relationship between the brand and the consumer. And then on the other hand, there's a lot of very good segmentation done that gets stuck in presentation decks where people understand how attitudes and needs and behaviors all come together to create segments. But they know a whole lot about 3,000 people and they can't operationalize it. And our breakthrough is that we can operationalize what's historically called an attitudinal segmentation, which when combined with all the behavioral data, completely changes the economics of acquisition, cross-sell, and retention of customers. And most importantly, actually serves those customers better building brand equity as opposed to just jamming the next product at them. And so it's really that mission. I'm sounding a bit like a crusader here, even though I'm clearly a driver. It's that mission that my colleagues and I at Rosemark are really focused on. How do we bring the brand? How do we bring consumer insights a la attitudinal segmentation basically back into the center of the plate and leverage all the marketing automation that's now available? So combining the two tools in a way that really changes the game and ultimately builds shareholder value.
I think to the listener's ear, it sounds like you're also leaning into the current hot trend that's on everyone's lips about AI and machine learning. And I wonder to what extent, as you and your colleagues are working on the platform here at Rosemark, is that something that you lean into and embrace and say, great, I'm happy to have our clients think about what we do as, leveraging AI? Or is that something that, because it has so much attached to that nomenclature, is that something that you shy away from? How do you deal with that AI label, so that you are either leaning into this incredibly cool trend or leaning away from something that I think a lot of people, frankly, don't understand? What's your take on that?
Yeah, everybody loves to think about AI as either the villain or the panacea. And like every technology, it will be hyped, and then it will disappoint, and then it will settle into a appropriate level of use. And the way we're thinking about AI right now is that it is a method, it is a tool that you use on the way to deeper insight. One of the great seductions, I think, of any new technique or method is that people basically want to push the button and get the answer out. And I think that's a very, very dangerous way to think about AI. I think, just quote, let the algorithm run, we'll train the algorithm will get smarter over time. All those things are true. But if it's not done in a supervised way with a prioritization that comes from us humans on what is it that you're actually trying to understand, it's likely to go through this disappointment loop where it's overhyped and then underutilized. The way we're using AI and machine learning right now is in a very specific sort of sub-routine of the way we build these things we call quantitative personas. So what we're not doing is pushing the button and saying, what is the quantitative persona? But rather using it as a way to hunt through many, many millions and billions of individual data observations that then allow us to see the pattern better. But when you obsolete judgment or you assume that the tool will obsolete judgment, I think you're on the path to disappointment. It's a powerful tool, but it's not the answer.
Well, you've said a lot of smart things I'd love to unpack. And one of them, I think, is a key theme for me of this whole conversation, right? Which is, I don't think there is an easy button when people look at a career like yours, as successful as it has been as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as someone who successfully sold an agency for the better part of $1 billion, who's been a lecturer at an Ivy League university, and here you are again at it, building another platform, I guarantee that you'd say there is no easy button, right? There have been interesting moments along the way. Certainly that was an interesting moment when you and Kurt decided to mortgage your homes. I had to believe there was a really interesting piece of salesmanship at a kitchen table with a spouse on that one. So there is no easy button, I think, on this journey. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Now, this is entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, and it takes a tenacity that borders on neuroses, I think. And you have to have the right mix of luck, success, and failure. I think these are the galvanizing elements of an entrepreneurial career. And if you don't have luck, then you don't have enough of the success. If you have too much of the success, then you're not learning from your failures. So a little bit like driving a shift car, you need the gas, you need the clutch, and you definitely need the brake too. And so, being able to toggle across these three forces is really, I think, a crucial element of entrepreneurial success.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I want to make sure that before we wrap, I ask you is, I am sure for a lot of folks, whether they are the students in your classroom or the executives that you've worked with in these companies that you've created and the new company you're creating, there are people that look to you as you are their mentor, their role model. Are there people in your career that you'd look back and say, wow, there's someone that Chris, really learned from, and that man or woman really became a role model or a mentor or just someone in my mind's eye that I really have learned from and I can point my finger to? Are there any of those that come to mind for you?
Oh, for sure. In fact, this is the final lecture of my course, in which I talk about how important it is to have heroes, and then some of those heroes become your mentors, and then over time, you may become the hero or mentor of others. And so, just starting with the heroes of my life, my heroes are my dad, Bobby Orr, and Sir Thomas More. We don't have time to go into each of those. I'll just stop on Bobby Orr for a moment, who played hockey for only 6 years and revolutionized the way people play defense, because he was an offensive defenseman. He was an entrepreneur on skates. In terms of direct, I only got to meet Bobby Orr once, so I can't really call him my mentor. But my mentors are many. I'll just call out two of them. One, the famous Jim Burke, who many know as the Tylenol CEO. His ethic, his leadership, his courage to lead through the Tylenol crisis not once but twice is an enormous inspiration to me. And my first boss, Tony Vernon, who should have gone on to become CEO of Johnson & Johnson, but went on to become CEO of Kraft instead. He's a classic captain. His ability to reach, inspire, empower, and franchise those who worked for him is just remarkable. And I often think in my leadership, what would Tony do in this situation?
Well, it's funny as you talk about those folks, Tony, who you and I both know, and Jim Burke, who it sounds like I did not have the privilege and the pleasure, but one of the themes that I'm a fan of and that my book Coming About is the people that are able to lean into those moments of pivots and be successful, to persevere, to overcome obstacles, as you talked about earlier, to have that conviction. And even just in your thumbnail description of Tony, someone who was a highly successful, very, very senior healthcare pharmaceutical marketer, and then went on to become the CEO of a food company. And there are people who would look at that resume and say, wait, how can you be ready to be the CEO of a pharmaceutical company and be the CEO of a company that makes my macaroni and cheese? But it's because Tony had the skill set and the belief and the courage to make that pivot and to move those 800 miles from Philadelphia to Chicago to go from Tylenol to macaroni and cheese, right? And it's all that we've been talking about here about having that vision, having that ability to persevere. And as you said a few moments ago, learn from the mistakes, celebrate the successes, surround oneself with good people. I think those are all obviously attributes. And I won't embarrass you, but I do seem to think that your father, who you mentioned as one of your early heroes, didn't he also teach on that Princeton University campus?
He did. He did. He was a member of what's known as the Great Generation, having landed in the D-Day invasion and then going to Harvard on the GI Bill to get his PhD, and then having a very successful career as an economist and an economics professor. And I think having heroes and having mentors is just so crucially important. And so I encourage, and there's no kind of age boundary to that. I still have heroes and mentors. And so, I encourage everyone to find the mentor for the moment that they're working through. And it can just be enormously powerful in your personal and professional development.
That's a great sort of punctuation mark add to all of this, Chris, right? That even someone like yourself still has heroes, mentors, role models, and you may pick one up 3 years from now that's the appropriate one for that part of the journey, for that pivot that you're making or that thing that you're trying to accomplish at that time. That's a great way to end it. Chris, I really appreciate the time and you being so candid and sharing your history with me and with us. Thank you for taking the time to be here with me today on Coming About, and I wish you and the Rosemark team tremendous success. It sounds like what you're doing in the next chapter, even deeper than the first. You mentioned the techniques, you mentioned the team. Super excited to see what happens next with Rosemark. All the best to you, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. It was an honor to join you on your podcast.
Thank you, Chris. And that wraps up this episode of Coming About. If you like the show, please take a moment to subscribe so you'll get notified when we release additional episodes. And if you have a moment, I'd love it if you left us a review or other comments so that we can share it with other individuals like yourself so that they can learn about the show. I look forward to speaking with you next time.
This has been Coming About. We hope these conversations have left you feeling empowered and ready to take your organization to the next level. To speak with Dave about your business transformation or to learn more about Health Monitor Network, go to healthmonitornetwork.com. And don't forget to check out his book, Coming About, How We Transformed a Major Media Company and the Lessons There for You. Available wherever books are sold. Coming About with David Paragamian is a production of Advantage Audio.